everybody. Welcome. My name's Jacqueline Callahan, and on behalf of the Byrdcliffe Forum Author Talks and the Woodstock Byrdcliffe Guild, welcome you to actually our final author talk.
Jackie,
and I'm so pleased to introduce to you Bethany Saltman. She's an author, an award-winning editor, and a researcher. Her work can be seen in magazines like The New Yorker, New York Magazine, Atlantic Monthly, Parents, Town and Country, and many others. Today, she's going to be talking about Strange Situation, A Mother's Journey into the Science of Attachment, which was published this past spring. And this is her first book. And Bethany also serves as the best-selling book partner and in-demand mindfulness mentor, helping writers and entrepreneurs at all stages of the creative process envision and execute their projects, including book proposals, books, content development, big ideas, messaging, and more. Bethany.
I think your audio is going a little in and out, Jackie. We can't hear you.
Oh, she just muted. Let me.
Okay. We can probably just get started too.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Terrific. Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Phillips, and I'm the Q in the Q&A here. And I'm thrilled because I am such a fan of Bethany Saltman. In fact, our friendship began because I wrote her a fan letter. And I said, I read your article about attachment parenting and exploring, not attachment parenting, but exploring the science of attachment, the article that was the seed for this book in New York Magazine several years ago. And we started getting together every so often. I've had her into my class. I teach a class called Love and Heartbreak at SUNY New Paltz. And so I've been following the journey of this book coming into being, loved it to death when it came into being, and I'm just here with great pleasure as the Q in the Q&A. So, so Bethany, if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me here, and it's a delight to see you, Lisa. Wish we were together, but this is really exciting.
Yeah, and this is the way it rolls now. So, so I want to share with you and with the audience my first two impressions of the concept of attachment, and they came at the exact right time when I was a new mother. My daughter was, I think, in her first year, and there were two ways I encountered it. And one is the really typical way that people hear. They hear about attachment parenting, and I used to joke very cynically that this was an evil concept because you're not supposed to put down your kid, you're supposed to wear your kid, sleep with your kid, answer to your kids' every cry, etc. And then the second time I encountered it was from my sister, who was getting her MSW. And she described the different attachment patterns, attachment types, they're often called. And she described insecure attachment as something that happened because the mother was distracted and not always immediately attentive to the infant. And I thought, oh my God, that's me. I'm always distracted. I'm always doing a million things. I'm screwing up my kid. I must be a terrible mother. So I know much better now, in part because of Strange Situation. And so I want to start the conversation by asking you how you hope your memoir and your work are changing our cultural takeaways about attachment. What should we be getting out of this highly influential but much misunderstood theory?
Wow, what a great question. Thank you for such careful consideration. Yeah, so I hope that attachment parenting becomes something we use air quotes around, because one of the biggest disservices that, I mean, you know, science gets hijacked all the time. Dr. Sears and his so-called attachment parenting is one example of an incredibly important and nuanced scientific discovery being completely hijacked by someone with a very specific agenda that has absolutely nothing to do with the science. So Dr. Sears is a conservative, oh my gosh, it's like major thunder over here. Dr. Sears is a conservative Christian, or was at the time that he wrote his book, The Baby Book, that is the Bible of attachment parenting, who really believes that women are best suited at home with their babies. And he created, he took attachment theory and used it to advance his agenda. So I don't want to go too far into him, but that's just a fact of what he did. And so because the way attachment functions and the way that we think about attachment is so, it's so primal, you know, like we hear these stories about if you don't do this or that, you won't be attached. And he says as much. And so everybody, when, you know, all these years, 10 years that I was writing this book, and I would tell people I'm writing a book about the science of attachment, again and again, people would say to me, sorry, the dogs are going to go crazy because of the thunder. People would say to me, oh, I tried a sling, but my kid hated it. Or, oh, I tried co-sleeping, but I couldn't do it. Or, oh, my kid hated breastfeeding. You know, all of the things that that Dr. Sears tells people, mothers specifically, that they need to do in order. Sorry, let me close the door. All the things that Dr. Sears has suggested that mothers specifically need to do in order for their kids to become attached. So whether or not you're aware of attachment parenting, whether or not you read Attachment Parenting, Dr. Sears, you know, in the culture, we have this idea that that attachment happens through certain behaviors. Are the dogs really bothering people? Can you
I
hear
think
it?
it's just the glitches of the Zoom era. I
Okay.
think we're good. We're fascinated. Keep going.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
I'm used to it. I can keep going, but I don't
Yeah.
want to be unattuned. So, so Dr. Sears has really made it so that people think that they know what attachment is and that they oftentimes hate it. So for very good reasons, because the fact of the matter is, we're all attached regardless of who our parents are, whether the only in cases of extreme neglect are we unattached. Most of us are completely attached. We may be a more or less optimal attachment. That's where secure, insecure come from. But there's no such thing really as an unattached baby, at least certainly nobody who's having these conversations about their kids' attachment. So that's one of the biggest things that I would really like to change, is that people can relax. It's going to be okay. Your kid is attached to you. And if you aren't happy with what you think is maybe some kind of a secure attachment, you can change the way that you behave with your child by simply being more present and by paying more attention to what's going on inside of you. So the Dr. Sears version of attachment is really kind of a behaviorist, you know, focusing on what happens outside of the parent, you know, how their parenting style, what they do. But the science of attachment shows that what really gets transmitted from parent to child and then through generations is how a parent feels on the inside about their own attachment relationships in their history, about their relationship to their child, and about their ability to regulate themselves in moments of distress. So if your child freaks you out when they cry and you can't handle your own freak out, then it's going to be harder for you to attune to your child's cry. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or a bad mom. It means you can work with yourself, and you will be better off. Your child will be better off. It's just normalizing the whole thing so that it's not this big sort of heightened woo-woo BS.
Okay, so we've gotten that out of the way. I'm very curious. Strange Situation focuses on your daughter's earliest years. Now that she is a teenager, how does understanding the science of attachment help you parent now?
It helps me so much because what the science of attachment has taught me is that, again, like I was just saying, what really matters to my child as far as our parenting relationship goes, she's almost 15, so she's, more and more having her own experience of the world. But as far as our relationship goes, what matters is my capacity to hold her in mind. So this idea of attunement that is central to attachment security is comes from the parent's capacity to, like I said before, contain their own feelings and manage themselves. So, people often say teenagers are kind of like toddlers. They have big feelings, they kind of make a mess. And that's true. There is an element of that. And I feel like I, learned a lot when she was young about how to manage myself and then, manage her better. And then the other thing that's really helped me is recognizing that so in the strange situation, the laboratory procedure that my book is named after, it's a series of comings and goings that really helps the trained observer understand the attachment pattern that this pair has, a mother and the child, or the father and the child. And the most important moment in this series of comings and goings is the reunion. So what that shows us is that, children, when left alone, when children under stress, teenagers under stress, adults under stress, we will all do what we do. We have such a variety of temperaments. Some of us freak out, some of us go dark, some of us get anxious, some of us get depressed, whatever it is that we do. What matters as far as attachment is concerned is, can the caregiver help to bring the child to a state of less stress? Can the adult work as the secure base in the child's life? And so when Azalea gets upset about things, I don't worry about that as much as, can she come back? Can she return through my help and assistance, or through, as I said, as she gets older, through her own capacity that she will glean from ultimately me and my husband and our what's called an internal working model. She learns through us how a person is supposed to be held, and then as we grow up, we hold ourselves in that way.
Mm-hmm. I think those are very wise words. So speaking as the mother of a teenager as well. So, I've really enjoyed in your work learning more about the concept of delight. And it's actually, when I read the word and on your pages, I feel like somebody's giving me a drink of water after I've been thirsty for a long time, especially now in the very trying circumstances of a pandemic. And I'm feeling like this is a word that needs to have its moment in the way that we've had moments around happiness and resiliency in books on psychology and TED Talks and our cultural conversation. So let's go for it now. Have our moment in this conversation. Tell us about delight and how it relates to attachment theory, and why we need it now when it seems so elusive.
It's my favorite word. And it's my favorite experience. So Mary Ainsworth, who came up with The Strange Situation and was one of the early mavericks of this work, she found that the pairs that were the most secure, which she deemed to be most secure, meaning that the child could use the parent as a secure base in times of stress, which in fact, my dogs are trying to use me as a secure base right now in their times of stress. So
there's some clips in the quote in the chat about it, actually. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna let them in because I'm not going to be very attuned if I don't. So bear with me.
Perfect moment. Perfect segue. And again, if folks, if questions come to mind as you're watching, please do weigh in on the chat, and Jackie will run board on that.
Everybody's here. Come
on. Wow. Okay, everybody's here.
Come on, baby.
Heading to the secure base.
Yeah, exactly. Oh dear, I've tried so hard to make this not happen. I'm sorry. Where am I?
So about delight.
Yes, delight. So So what she saw in the secure pairs that where the children could use their parents as a secure base was what she called mutual delight, which is really just exactly what it sounds like to her. But to her, this was a technical term. She really tracked delight as something that would help her understand security. And the reason for that is because when an adult is able to feel delight, they are able to help the child feel that they are being delighted in. And so I think this is so important because, it's that old, like, you want to be the apple of someone's eye. You want your child to feel like they're the apple of your eye or someone's eye. We all need to be the apple of someone's eye. Where, when you walk into the door, walk in the room, someone lights up. And that's the delight that Mary Ainsworth was talking about. And this is not something that we're going to be experiencing all the time, obviously. It's just something that needs to be part of our lives. And the reason I'm so taken with it is because, and I'm a longtime Zen practitioner, and I've spent a lot of hours on the meditation cushion. And so I know intimately that the only way I'm going to be able to express something is if I am experiencing it myself. So this idea that, Mary Ainsworth found delight, mutual delight in these securely attached pairs, to me, that's an invitation for all of us to learn how to cultivate delight. What does it mean to delight? Because you're not going to be able to delight in your child if you don't know what delight feels like. And so many of us don't. And that is, a tragedy. And that's something that we just aren't used to orienting around. And so, women specifically have such a hard time doing things for ourselves. So I always say that if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your kid, because that's something that we're allowed to work hard for, be a good mom. But the fact of the matter is, when we learn to have delight in our own lives, even through things like, just like tchotchkes that you love, or food that you love, or meditation or yoga, or just sensory pleasure, and it's we have to learn to let it in deeply, and then we can express it, and then our child gets to feel delighted in. And I often talk about how, this word makes people feel like it has to be something really fancy. And one of my favorite things in the world is the Real Housewives of New York and Beverly Hills. And Azalea has also learned to love this. It is a delight. We love it. We sit down, we do it together. We have these amazing relationships about friendships, about relationships, about sex, about aging, about style. And it's delightful. And so it doesn't have to be some sort of fancy, erudite, elevated thing. Just go for it and bring your kid along.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Tell us more about Mary Ainsworth and who she was. And I'm really interested in this response, perhaps through that somewhat cliched question, what would you ask her if you had her over for dinner? And of course, what would you cook? Because I know you're into food.
Yeah, I am. She was too. That's one of the reasons I love her so much. She loved to cook roast chicken and drink bourbon and smoke Benson and Hedges. So I would do that whole thing. I probably wouldn't smoke anymore, but if I could, I would. So that would be the meal for sure. Now Mary Ainsworth, it's interesting because just yesterday I saw on Instagram that Allure magazine wrote an article about attachment styles, which is a whole nother thing. That's the commonly used phrasing for patterns of attachment. And people, you think that you can take a quiz and find out your attachment style, and you can, but that is not what the science of attachment has been pointing to overall. It's much more complicated. And so Allure magazine wrote an article, someone wrote an article for Allure magazine about attachment styles. It came into my Google alerts because I have it set for anything about attachment theory. And I started reading. I was like, oh, whatever, it's the same old thing. But then I saw that she was describing Mary Ainsworth as the student of John Bowlby. And I just said, oh my gosh, this is happening again. So Mary Ainsworth was a Canadian psychologist. She was born in 1913. And she is one of the most important psychologists who has ever lived. She developed the strange situation, the most important procedure, laboratory procedure in the history of psychology. It's been repeated tens of thousands of times around the world. It's the gold standard for assessing attachment security around the world. It has never been improved upon. And she worked in tandem with the British psychiatrist John Bowlby, and to this day, everybody says she was his student. It just drives me bananas. She worked with him in England. That's how she met him. And he was in the process of developing his theory of attachment after working with children who had been orphaned after World War II. And he realized that these children were mourning their attachment figure. They weren't just upset because they weren't being fed, which was the prevailing thought at the time, that we love our parents because they feed us. And so she, being a woman of her time, didn't believe him. She did the work. She did a lot of research. She learned a lot about how to do this particular kind of research, but she thought he was really full of it and she didn't buy it. And then she went to Uganda with her husband and said, well, I may as well do a research project. And so she taught herself the language enough to talk to tribal chiefs and get together this group of mothers and babies, 26 mothers and their babies, so that she could study what was actually happening between mothers and babies. And it had nothing to do with Africa. It had nothing to do with Uganda. It was just that she was there. And so she was like, oh, let me check it out. So she ended up studying these mothers and babies and seeing instantly, oh my gosh, they are absolutely in a relationship, just like John said. And I'm riveted. Let me learn more. So one of the reasons I love her as much as I do is because she was so smart. You know, she's one of those that graduated from high school at 16, you know, topped everything she did so that the professors were asking her to write books with them. You know, she studied the Rorschach and then she mastered the Rorschach, and she just was one of these pattern seeking people. And she was totally curious and always willing to say she was wrong and always willing to pivot and change course and do it a new way. And she discovered these patterns of attachment out of the blue, just by watching mothers and babies. And she wasn't a mother herself, which I often say was a good thing, because I don't think that someone who had children would be able to look quite so closely at that relationship, because it is very sensitive. So, I mean, I could go on about my love of Mary, but so she has not gotten her due. She was a feminist maverick. She fought to desegregate the faculty lounge at Johns Hopkins that only men were allowed into. She demanded she get paid the same amount as her male colleagues. She was a very special woman, and I feel very sad that she still isn't recognized, and that she's considered, you know, John Bowlby's student.
It's funny, I saw your Instagram post about that mention of her as Bowlby's student, and I was picking up a book that I'm considering using as a textbook by this Israeli clinical and social psychologist. And I was looking up Mary Ainsworth and John Bowlby, and it's the same thing, student. So it's really entrenched and disturbing. So
it is. I mean, she did work on his team, so she learned from him. But I mean, like, I learned from you, Lisa, and nobody's going to call me, you know, your student. It's such a pejorative kind of experience. You know, it's patriarchy at its finest, really.
Yeah, and they were colleagues, and she did, what's fascinating about her is she was so hands-on. She was in there observing the mothers and the children.
Wasn't doing he developed the theory, and he was brilliant, and nobody's trying to take that away from him. I'm certainly not. But she then took the theory and she looked at it in real time, and it's her work that made us all now talk about attachment. If Bowlby had just done Bowlby and she had never come along and made this something that we see in real time, nobody would have really, you know, it would have been this rarefied theory that wouldn't have made the impact that it has made.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and as I ask, I invite others to weigh in on the chat, because I'd love to know more about what everybody else is curious about in the room. I could talk to Bethany forever, but I've got to share her. So, one of the things about assessing adult attachment types that I find so fascinating is its relationship to storytelling, like how well and how richly you talk about your past, even if it's a really difficult past, matters so much in assessing your attachment type. Could you tell us about this aspect of the adult attachment interview and how, what's a good way to put it, what it means for our capacity to change our lives?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is such a fascinating thing. The adult attachment interview was developed by a woman who studied with Mary Ainsworth. Her name is Mary Main, and she was a linguist who was looking for a PhD program. And Mary Ainsworth said, "You can come here to Johns Hopkins as long as you're willing to study attachment." And she was like, "Oh, I have no interest in this, but let me do it." So she got involved and she found Mary Ainsworth to be the genius that she was. And so she ended up doing all this work around language. And so she was doing, she was looking at the strange situation Mary Main was, but then wanted to see, well, what is it that what are the parents of these different kinds of children like? And so she went in and she started asking them questions about their childhood. And then she took their interviews and she transcribed it verbatim and started looking at it through Grice's maxims, which are quantity, quality, manner, and I'm missing a couple of them. But basically, how well do you tell your story? Are you giving enough detail or not enough? Do you are you aware of your listener? Are you is it linear? Is it coherent? And what she discovered was that even the parents who described treacherous childhoods, but did so in a coherent manner, had children who were more secure. Adults who described their childhoods in a preoccupied, kind of chaotic way where you couldn't really track the story, or they'd get super into detail in one thing and not get into detail in another, they had children who were less secure. Likewise with what's called dismissing adults, where they're like, well, I don't remember. I don't know. It's a very restricted affect in the story. Those people had insecurely attached children. So of the insecures, there's avoidant and resistant. And those correlated with the preoccupied adult and the dismissing adult. So this was earth-shattering, headline-making news. And it has been studied many, many, many times. There was one study, 10,000 AAIs in, I believe, like the 80s. So this is not some, small study. What has been found is that the reverse is true. So if I'm pregnant and I get my adult attachment interview done, by looking at my transcript, it can be predicted what kind of attachment I'm going to have with my child who's unborn, based on how well do I tell my story about my childhood. So this is what's really, really, really important. It doesn't matter if you're a lawyer and you are amazing in the courtroom and you can be as coherent as the day is long and everyone believes you and you've got this amazing presentation, or you're at a party and you can tell a great story, you can tell a joke, everybody loves you, you're charismatic. But then when you start talking about your mom and what happened between the ages of 0 and 12, and you clam up. And that's because our attachment systems are so profound and so much a part of our entire mind and body that it's the unconscious that comes up through the adult attachment interview. The questions are designed to surprise the unconscious. So it's just like the strange situation. It's not a parlor game where you can start noticing, oh, this person, is really can't, give good detail. They must be avoidant. Or a baby who cries a lot when they're separated, they must be, insecure. It's so specific to these instruments. You have to really be trained in how they work. There are certainly things that we can learn from them, glean from them. The main one being, I think this is what you're saying, is that, or asking, is that our capacity to hold our experience, like we were saying in the very beginning, the parent's capacity is what's in play. It's not what happened to you, it's how you understand what happened to you. So when people have very difficult lives and experiences as children, the more we can do to metabolize that experience, integrate it. And I'm not saying, become a writer and shape your story, but to just internally do that work, whether it's through therapy or meditation or art or however that works, metabolizing, integrating, getting to know ourselves is the most important thing we can do for our children from an attachment point of view. And this is not because I like to do those things, it gives me a good excuse. I mean, it's science after science after science. Study after study after study is pointing in this direction. It's the biggest relief that parents can experience if you're, of the mind to be interested in yourself. If that's not of much interest, then first of all, you're probably not asking the question. And so, you're off the hook.
It's fascinating because when I think about it, it plugs right into the mechanism of intimacy. So, intimacy is founded to a large degree on the exchange of emotionally valuable information.
Exactly.
And so if you're somebody who's used to communicating that way with other people, that sets you up nicely for passing that along to, for being a present parent.
Exactly. So the hallmark of a securely attached adult is that they value attachment.
Mm-hmm.
So if we just let that in, when I was doing this training, I've done all of these trainings. And when I was doing the adult attachment one, there was one transcript that just blew my mind that we found it to be secure because this person had so much strife in their family. They felt so abandoned. They, he was sent off to boarding school. His family was poor. He worked in the family business, but he would come back at Christmas and they would all be together. And they valued attachment. They struggled mightily, but the fact that they kept returning to each other and he reported that was enough to give him a secure score. Even though all the reporting, and when you do these coding, you report for probable experience on the left, like what actually happened, and then coherence of mind on the right. And his probable experience was dark. It was bad. He was bullied. He was neglected. It was not a happy childhood, but his coherence of mind was so strong, and he was able to report with clarity that they returned to each other.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a major wow for me.
Okay, so Jackie, I see questions coming in.
Yeah, so there are a couple questions, and this is so, thank you so much for this. This conversation is amazing. The work, anyway, I'm just processing what you're saying, so I can't offer anything except read the question. And this comes from Myra Schwartz, and she says, I'm curious if a child is very attached to their mother, how does this affect the attachment to their father, especially during divorce and visitation?
That is a great question. There is some controversy in this area. My sense of it from what I've done is that the attachment, well, this is just a fact. Attachment relationships are relationship based. So we're going to have different attachment qualities with our mother than with our father. And different children might even have different attachment relationships with different parents. Overall, all we really need to have an optimal experience is one secure attachment. So if you have two, all the better. If the question is, will a child be okay with one secure attachment and not another? The answer is yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know does that answer your question, Myra?
How about I read the next question? Okay. And this comes from Dorothea Marcus, and she wants to know, how much difference is there in attachment issues for biological and adopted children? My son was abandoned at 1 month old and adopted at 6 months old by a single mother.
Well, that is a great question. And the research is that it works the same way. So adopted children who have been adopted into families. Now, I'm not totally sure of exactly at what age. I'm sure there's a cutoff, but the principles, same principles apply. Securely attached adults who adopt babies raise securely attached children, more so than insecurely attached adults raise secure raise secure babies. So in other words, the same principles apply. If you are an adoptive parent, it will do you well, just like a biological parent, to do that kind of metabolizing work on your own childhood, your own stuff, your own issues. And certainly children come with their karma and their biological and temperamental issues. Sometimes some children are easier to attach with than others, and it depends a lot on goodness of fit. For instance, my daughter and I we're exact half birthdays. I'm July 27th and she's January 27th. She's an Aquarius, I'm a Leo. We are like perfectly suited, and I thank my lucky stars for that every day, because I don't know if I could have handled much more. So, it is definitely true that some attachment relationships are more difficult, but the work is always the same.
Next question. Thank you for that. Next question is from Doug Shear, and his question is, with divorce being so common, leading children to being separated from at least one of the parents, how does this impact the adult lives of those children?
That is a very complex question that I'm not going to say I know I have, the answer to that at my fingertips, because I'm sure there have been studies that have looked at that specifically, and I have not availed myself of that specifically. However, like I said, my sense is that when you have a secure attachment as a child, what it does is it protects you against difficulty in your life. So when we provide our child with a secure attachment through attunement, through mutual delight, by letting them know that they're the apple of our eye most of the time, some of the time, then whatever happens later in their life, they're going to have more strength of character, and they're going to have more grit. They're going to have more, just a stronger kind of sense that they know how to get their bread buttered. They know how to get their needs met. That's what a secure attachment gives a child. So regardless of the scenario, that's always the benefit.
The next question comes from Mary Kate Marley, and she wants to know, what are suggestions for reviewing your own attachments to your parents and reviewing your own disposition to soothing yourself and in return your child? In other words, how do I go about being more self-aware in my parenting that allows for a more secure attachment? I know you mentioned therapy. Is there a focus in therapy? And then what can you do outside of therapy?
Yeah, this is always the question. So therapy is really, really good. Anything to bring about what's called mentalization. Mentalization is that quality of seeing that you exist outside of just, being inundated with sensation and experience. Securely attached people have the capacity to mentalize and to see, like, oh, I'm thinking right now. Oh, I'm angry right now. Oh, I'm hot. I'm nervous about the dogs. I can see what's happening. And so therapy is a really good way to do that. It's like creating a little bit of distance between you and your experience. And that's what we offer our children when we ourselves are securely attached. So, it's really a wild spectrum, and, we're all at a different place at a different time. And there's no, like, this person is secure and this person is insecure. So a healthy therapeutic relationship is always going to be helpful. Learning to meditate is incredibly helpful. And there have been a lot of studies showing a strong correlation between mindfulness and attachment security. So that's a great thing to do. And delight, like, focus on delight, find that delight, cultivate delight, and take it seriously. It's very important.
Another question, this is from Doug Shear. How is codependence different from attachment? And when does one become the other?
Well, codependence in the mainstream way that we understand that is when someone is insecure. And so they are, perpetually concerned with the state of the other. So take my dogs, for example. This is a perfect example. They were really anxious out there. They were afraid of the thunder. They wanted to get in. They came in, and look at them now. Well, you can see one, the other one. They're both lying down. They're completely calm. They're securely attached. And dogs actually really do have attachment relationships with their owners. So that was a perfect, strange situation that we just all got to witness. And yay, my dogs are securely attached. Now, a codependent dog or person would be so concerned about me that they would be checking and like, was that okay? I'm sorry I interrupted you. They wouldn't be able to relax, but because they don't trust that I care more about them than I do about myself in this moment when it's appropriate to care. I have boundaries so they can trust that. And they know that when they're not allowed in, they don't get in. And this was a really important experience. They needed to come in. So they're relaxed. Codependent people, we're kind of mixing our metaphors because codependency is not actually part of the attachment literature, but I know what you mean by that. And the codependent people that I know are very insecurely attached, and they're really anxious that they have to take care of other people in order to get their needs met. And that's a perfectly reasonable way to feel when that's how you've grown up.
So I have that's it for the questions in the chat right now. I have like a booksellery sort of question, which is that if you're a busy parent, how do you read your book?
Oh, you can listen to it on Audible. It is an audiobook.
Uh-huh. That's good. That is a good way to listen to a book. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And another kind of bookseller question. So your book came out right at the beginning or the second month of COVID. And so how have you been able to connect? You've had not the book tour you thought you would have, and how's been the experience of bringing this work to others?
It's been really exciting. Once I got over the hump of like, oh my God, seeing this tsunami coming at me. I mean, I worked on this book for 10 years and, worked really hard to get the book deal with Random House and the whole bit. And so it was a shock. I'm not going to lie when I realized that this was coming at me. And, so that was hard. And then when I kind of worked through that and I got on Instagram, that was when I decided, okay, I got to get on Instagram. I've actually been enjoying it so much more than I ever thought I would. And it's kind of a silver lining. I'm enjoying being out there and talking to readers and doing events like this and getting all the fun. I mean, I'm still connecting to a lot of readers. A lot of people are reading it. And it's coming out in paperback in April. So that's really exciting. And so, yeah, it's been really interesting. I've learned so much about Instagram and about book promotion and about Zoom and how to present the work in a way that is, one of my biggest missions, back to Lisa's original question, is to de-shame being a human being. That's sort of a number one hope of mine, because women especially have been really put in a box of trying to be these emotionless, and men too, for sure, but women have it especially bad, that our feelings are somehow hurting our kids. And what I am here to report after, deep diving into the science, is that actually the opposite is true. When we try to move away from our feelings, thinking that it's going to be better for our kids, that's what creates all of that mishigas and all that codependence and all that avoidance and all that insecurity. Not that we should be like, vomiting our feelings on our kids, but that we need to metabolize, we need to integrate, we need to respect ourselves and do our adult work and our kids, so our kids don't have to.
That I feel like, gosh, that's an amazing place to end the conversation with. It was just so, perfect coming full circle, but I wanted to see if there were any other questions from Lisa or from anyone in the audience.
I had a thought, which is, I think that one of the best preparations for being the parent of a small child would be parenting a teenager first, because you sort of see where they go and how that, you know, that they do in their weird ways. Like they could be shrugging you off one day, but then they return to you the next and need to connect and need to be close. Like that's really what you're parenting for, as opposed to, and then it also means that delight is easier, right? Because you see what the shit the teens can throw at you.
Yeah.
So that, you know, a little upchucking and, you know, toilet training or whatever is like, hey, no biggie. And you could just have fun with it. But I, you know, our bodies aren't going to work that way, and time won't work that way. But anyway, this is, everyone should get online and order this from the Golden Notebook, contact list, pick up, all that good stuff. It's an amazing book. Just teaches me more and more as I remember it and think back to it and return to it. It's a special book that way. And congratulations, Bethany. And I can't wait for the paperback so more people will know your work.
Jackie, are there still signed copies at the Golden Notebook?
There, we actually have just sold out of our last bunch of copies, so we'll be getting more in, and we'll have you in to sign them.
Yeah,
And there was actually one more question, and this is from Judith, and she asks, recognizing that pandemic is a special problem, do people with attachment issues experience more loneliness?
I don't know that for certain, but I would extrapolate certainly. I mean, attachment, first of all, we all have attachment issues. We all need to feel loved. There's no protection against that. So we're all going to feel hurt when we're hurt, and we're all going to feel lonely when we're lonely. Now, if you are, you know, really insecurely attached as an adult, you might find that you're a little more anxious, but that's also a temperament thing. So I really don't want to have people thinking that there's this this categorization. We're all human. We all have the same basic repertoire of feeling, and the closer you can get to your own tender heart, the better off you're going to be. And this is a very difficult time for all of us. Some of us more than others, for sure. So whether you're secure or insecure, I would just invite you to take really, really good care of yourself. And, you know, we all deserve that.
If I could add something, I think that the theme today and in your work of for people not to feel shame about their inner selves, I think really applies here. I think one of the most important lessons of attachment is that this is how we're engineered and how we're wired, and that pretending that it doesn't matter, that you shouldn't, oh my God, I should be used to it after 8 months. That's not how it goes, and that we need each other, and it doesn't have to be parent, child, spousal, what have you. We need attachment figures in our lives to help us, the people we feel safe with. We need those people in our lives, and if the pandemic is taking that away from you, that is going to be a huge challenge. And that, to echo what Bethany said, yes, exactly, you want to really take care and do what you can to really nurse yourself through what is just objectively an incredibly trying time, without shaming yourself or pretending it shouldn't matter and you should be stronger.
Thank you. Thanks so much to both of you. This was a really just a fabulous conversation. Fabulous is not the right word, but it was really powerful. I'm taking it with me into my evening of parenting with my kids, and we'll see. I know that I won't feel bad.
Good.
Take delight, Jackie. Your kids are great.
Okay, thank you all so much. This was such a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks again to the Woodstock Byrdcliffe Guild. And please support all of your local institutions. The Woodstock Byrdcliffe Guild and Byrdcliffe Colony does so much in our community. And please think about them as the end of the year comes around. Everyone, have a wonderful evening and a safe December.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.